In the build-up to the new season of Doctor Who, I'm taking a look back at every episode from Season 1 and re-reviewing them all after a year of dwelling. Spoilers ahead for the whole series. Right, Episode 2, The Devil's Chord. The one that should have been Episode 5. Let me explain. I don't want to get ahead of myself here and start going on about later episodes, but as a quick overview of what I mean, I think The Devil's Chord, both tonally and from the script itself, should have been much later in the series. Tonally, it's a bit more intense than any Episode 2 normally is. That's not to say it shouldn't be the case sometimes, I just think this particular episode didn't need to be quite so early. I have my theories as to why it happened, and it's more or less down to the questionable production side of things I mentioned in my previous video. I think making The Devil's Chord so heavily focused on the series arc, and kind of kicking off the big stakes of the series, was brought forwards to help capture people. In case you didn't know, or you don't remember, the first two episodes aired on the same day in 2024. And honestly, I think it's as simple as two things. They needed audiences to see where the series might be going, so wanted to show off a more intense season arc driven episode. And I truly don't think they anticipated anyone coming back for another one after Space Babies. I gave it a 5 in my last video, and yeah, that's about right, and I think more or less that's what I've heard other people say. In this day and age with so much to watch, unless I already care, which I do because it's Doctor Who, I'm not coming back every week if the first episode was only a 5 out of 10, you know? And honestly, I think they all knew that, hence dropping a weirdly placed second episode right off the bat to try and keep people coming back. I personally think that the episode order should have been Space Babies, Boom, Dot and Bubble, Rogue, The Devil's Chord, 73 Yards, The Legend of Ruby Sunday, and The Empire of Death. That feels tonally much better placed. It doesn't have two Dr. Light episodes in a row, which was a crazy decision looking back. It has a Dr. Light Ruby focused episode just before the end. The Devil's Chord is in place of the old mid-season two-parter. Boom is still light enough on the story, but shows the audiences that it can get a bit darker with the themes. I don't know, I don't run the show. I mean, it's my life stream to write for the show, but we'll get there one day. First, I need to criticise the current writers for fundamentally misunderstanding the show they're writing and the audience they previously built. However, not in this video. I'll give it a rating at the end, but the headline is really that I like The Devil's Chord a lot. It was absolutely my favourite of the two last year when I watched them back to back, and it's my favourite of the two this year, watching them a day apart. It gave me a sense of relief that this show was still going to have those more heavy, more intense, strong villain-focused stories, which I know I just said was a weird move putting this as episode 2, and then I say I actually got a sense of relief when I saw it so early. My issue is that I should not have needed to feel relief after watching my favourite show, written by the man who shaped my childhood when he wrote the show the first time round. Problem is, by this point, I saw the cracks, not the cracks in the walls of the universe, which coincidentally I have a tattoo of. But if I stopped to list all the Doctor Who tattoos I have, I'd never finish the video. I can't speak for the experience a new viewer had, or how a child will have perceived this episode and this series. I'm only speaking as someone who grew up with the revival era of Doctor Who, and loved pretty much every second. It is my favourite show, and truthfully, I had such mixed feelings in the 2 years building up to this series. So yeah, I was relieved to see that my show was still going to be my show, because The Devil's Chord was absolutely that. It was fun, it was cheesy, it had a super strong villain, which we'll get to, a fantastic concept, it was full of season arc hints, you know, a little bit more obvious than a mention of Bad Wolf, oh, another tattoo I have, by the way, but still giving that same sense of excitement and thrill every time another tiny piece of information was given as to the identity of Ruby's family, or the mystery surrounding her, or whoever Maestro was surprised to see in that memory. It's a big one, and it's a lot of fun. It's not without its faults though, and while I will get back to the good stuff in a sec, I do want to highlight my main issues with the episode, of which there really aren't that many to be honest, they just need a lot of explaining. There are moments in this episode where I get the feeling that the Doctor is gonna do a David Tennant moment, and whip out one of the most beautiful, soulful speeches about loss, family, fear, whatever's on his mind. And in this series especially, I was expecting a lot of that, because this show now has the job of rehashing and re-explaining a lot of what the show is. But I don't want David Tennant again. I mean, I do, but I also don't. I'm gonna have to make like a 3-hour video essay on the 60th anniversary. It's been 18 months and I still don't really know what to think about that one. Point is, when David Tennant made his speech, it was amazing. And then Matt Smith had the impossible job of following him, and he nailed it, making his own bombastic Doctor speeches in his own way. This is true for every Doctor, but I got such a sense of the brooding David Tennant-style speech coming from the latest Doctor when discussing children, grandchildren, and genocide, and then suddenly it stopped. Like, I'm glad we didn't get a rehash of the same Doctor personality with the same speeches and everything, and trust me, Ncuti Gatwa is absolutely his own Doctor. Not in this video, but in another one very soon I will be gushing about that man, don't you worry. But yeah, I just feel like this was almost that, so I'm glad it didn't keep going and turn into that speech again and again and again, but I'm also a little frustrated because Like Space Babies, I feel as though the character development or character work is rushed in a lot of ways. We get hints at the Doctor's past, and we even get a Susan name drop. Hell, we got a Rani name drop in the previous one. Interesting. Moving on from that one. Anyway, yeah, the whole 1963, ooh, I'm over there with my granddaughter stuff felt so surface level compared to how the Doctor usually is with dishing out lore dumps to the companions. Honestly, that's my biggest gripe with it. We could have learnt so much about the Doctor or Ruby in this episode, but beyond the standard boilerplate dialogue you need to have at the start of each new series, we got none of it. We got none of the good stuff. Hell, we even had the Doctor run away because of the giggle in this episode, and that was never really touched on anymore. You know, the Doctor is typically, if something scares him that much, that's like a good focus for the next 10 minutes. He said in Space Babies that he's never scared. Well, unfortunately, all we've seen so far in this series is a Doctor who is scared of everything. Not a bad thing to be scared, but for the Doctor, this stuff is being overused. However, a mid-season scare after showing how unstoppable he is for 3 or 4 episodes would have been pretty good. Still sure that this was meant to be later and got moved. In fact, on that, Ruby says to the Doctor, "You never run." Well, if we're supposed to believe this is their second adventure, then he absolutely always does, from her perspective, and she shouldn't have enough experience to warrant saying never to him. Mind you, there might be a 6-month time jump in this episode, which makes sense if this is in the middle of the series. I don't know, it just felt like a bizarre episode to be so early. I'll move on from that, I keep going on about it. A couple of other things I don't like. The Beatles. What in God's name were they thinking? Not just with the casting, which is obviously hilarious, but cutting them out, cutting most of their scenes out. Same with Cilla Black. Why? I get that the episode needed to be 45 minutes now, which is another issue, because that decision clearly came about after they filmed the whole lot, and that is evident throughout every episode. But cutting scenes with the Beatles and Cilla Black, real historical figures, real people, the centre of the narrative, and fast-tracking those slower conversations where the Doctor reveals his inner feelings and thoughts, yet cutting them for a musical number at the end? What? I'm not against musical numbers, I love musicals, except Grease, and I love that Doctor Who is getting creative with it. I obviously don't like the song itself, which is arguably worse than the dog song, a song that took place in a world where good music didn't exist, and this musical number was supposed to celebrate the returning of said music. I don't know, man. Look, this scene isn't gay enough. Doctor Who is a profoundly camp TV show, and musicals even more so. I'm not trying to be rude or offensive in any way. I mean, it's kind of like a known, agreed upon fact that musicals are considered camp, and Doctor Who's always leaned slightly that way. But this musical number didn't commit enough, and it ended up being a weird mix of trying to appeal to the masses and being a little too camp for that, but not camp enough to actually be a musical segment of substance, you know? It's hard to explain. Anyway, I wish that scene wasn't there because other parts of the episode suffered for it. However, that is all the bad stuff, and that's really not a lot in the grand scheme of things. The episode exhibits some stellar performances, mostly from Ncuti Gatwa and Millie Gibson, but Jinx Monsoon gave me goosebumps every time they came on screen. For such a brand new character, Maestro really made a splash and left such a big presence. You know, I don't think we've seen the last of the Pantheon of Gods, to be honest, and I really hope we do see Maestro again, because this was such a fun episode. The idea of removing music from people, from the world, it's such a great concept. And man, when the Doctor used the sonic screwdriver to remove all sound, that extended 2-minute silence section was incredible. Doctor Who has always had pretty good direction, like nothing super out there normally. I mean, I guess any Rachel Talalay episode was always noticeably fancier, but she really is the peak Doctor Who director in my eyes. But this one went freaky with it. You know, really stunning shots, great control over the audience. I personally flip-flopped from excited to tense to worried so quickly that it felt intentional. I think this one really did a great job at telling a compelling story and sometimes scary story. I think this whole series looks amazing, by the way, especially one coming up soon in another video. But yeah, Maestro looking at the camera was great too, the fourth wall breaks were fun. Again, getting a bit more creative with the show is a welcome change. I'm not 100% sure about the Doctor doing it, but we'll see where that one goes. So far, Maestro and Mrs. Flood doing it has been fine, because I have my theories about what might happen in Season 2. Anyway, I'll explain my theory as the show comes out. It's not right for this video. Which is getting quite long already. I didn't realise I had this much to say about the Devil's Chord. I thought I'd be way angrier about Space Babies. Just wait till my video on the finale, bloody hell. The other good points for me were the music. It was stunning. Murray Gold, I love you. I always will. Once again, I feel like the Doctor hasn't fully hit his stride, but he was still great in this. I like the sense of adventure in the TARDIS from this pair. It's still an exciting time travel show, and I love it. The whole Ruby's past thing was great again. Even more lore dumping. Maestro mentioning the oldest one, saying he who waits is coming, all very, very good. Even saying Ruby has a strong song in her from that memory of her being dropped off at the church. I must clarify, I'm talking about the episode on its own. What all this leads to, well, my opinions on that will be clear in later videos, but I know a lot of people don't like the ending of this series, so I just want to clarify before you think I'm saying, oh, this is amazing. These videos are contained to the episode alone. and anything that came before. So, you know, I can't complain at this video yet until we see the payoff, and then I can say, maybe that was a bit weird. You know what I mean? And maybe I won't though. Spoilers, you'll have to find out. Anyway, yeah, visuals look great, some amazing VFX. I feel like they wasted the setting and the Beatles and Cilla Black a little bit though. The villain was great, I really want to see Maestro again. I'm a little concerned about the Doctor showing Ruby a broken future when she suggested that history can't be rewritten, since this is a direct copy of something that Tom Baker's Doctor did with Sarah Jane. Of course, now we know why that episode was referenced so much anyway. I really like The Devil's Chord, it's not without issues, but I do plan on rewatching this one occasionally. It has a lot going for it. Again, I just wish it fully committed a little bit more in some places. So much of it just still felt a bit shallow in my opinion. Anyway, 7.5 out of 10. Thanks for watching. This is a new channel I've dedicated to Doctor Who and maybe other film and TV stuff, but mainly Doctor Who. So if you've moved over here from Corkben, then thanks. If you're discovering me for the first time and you like my videos, or you like video games like Rayman and The Simpsons Hit and Run, then be sure to check out my other channel. I've got a video covering Boom coming very soon, but until then, stay wibbly, stay wobbly, stay timey-wimey, and I will see you in the next one.